What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing good.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, and we always like to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, let me know what you've been playing.
Yeah, so not too much. Still doing a lot of that stuff I've mentioned the last couple of weeks. God of War, all those other things, kind of trophy, cleaning up the trophy hunt and stuff like that. So last night I did complete Man-Eater. I beat it, and then I was so close to the plat that I just kind of got the platinum in one shot. And what I still like to say, what a rad and fun game. You know, it's a quick, I want to say 10 hours. I beat the game, got the platinum, and now I can just get it off my SSD and free up the little space that the PlayStation gives us. But still, what a fun game. I'm really glad that was there, because it was a real big comfort food. It's sort of it's an open world shark game, so kind of checklisting, like get all the collectibles, do this. But it was great to kind of watch the nonsensical, dumb story in a dumb fun kind of way, but also just cleaning up a bunch of like podcasts I listen to and all these other ones I get into, and I was able to just kind of clear out and just like the multitask, to kind of zone out and kind of just do what I want to do. Aspect of the shark game is it's really fun, and that's a game I could see myself going back to way later. Obviously no rush to do it now, especially, again, I got the trophies, everything's completed, so it is a fun game at its basis though. So I still recommend that for people who at least hopefully added it to their library when it was on PS Plus, because it's a fun game to check out when there's like some downtime, or if you just need to cleanse the palate when you're playing other stuff. The other game that I've been obviously playing my fighting games and kind of stuff like that, but the other game I tried, it was on special I never bought through them, through GameFly, which is that the old Netflix sort of style for gaming.
Yeah, it's like a rent thing.
The rent thing. They also sell the game sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So they had Kingdom Hearts Memory of Melody, or Melody of Memory for $25.
Oh, okay.
They had a special free shipping, so I was like, yeah, you know what, why not? And I got this. It's been a few weeks actually that I bought this. Finally decided to launch it up, because I'm a big Kingdom Hearts fan. I kind of just need to own all the games in a form. So I got it. It sat on my PS4. I didn't even dare put it in my PS5. I put it in my PS4, and I said, you know what? I enjoy rhythm games. I platinumed all the Persona games. The dancing games anyway. I platinumed the fourth one twice, technically. So I thought, well, Kingdom Hearts, and I remember trying the demo, and I wasn't too fond of it, but I'm like, well, there's got to be more content. And all the problems I had with the demo, I have still with this game. This is one of the biggest, laziest cash grabs they kind of did. Not in the format. It's sort of the fact that they try to make it more a Kingdom Hearts game than they do a rhythm game. And the issue is, like, in its basis, it's still a rhythm game. Here's the quote-unquote line, which is Sora, Donald, Goofy, except they're not standing in line, so they're off rhythm. The notes come and you have to do different things, except to just hit basic notes, you have 4 buttons that do the same thing. So you can literally almost play the whole thing with just pushing one button that controls all 3 tracks, it just wouldn't make sense. In a rhythm game, if you had like a square, triangle, circle, you know what to push when. You control all 3 with one button, until that there's 2 notes, which are enemies, and it's just very convoluted. The pacing's all off, because instead of hitting things to the beat of the music, you have to hit the beat to when Sora jumps, then you have to strike. You have to wait for Donald, Goofy to kind of catch up. Look, they'll be at the line, they'll run up, then you have to hit it. So, it's all off. It's really off as a rhythm game, and it's not only kind of boring too, it's kind of like a task. It's like, you hit it to the rhythm. I know these songs as well as you do. You can hum most of these songs, and you know the beats and everything. So when you're playing it and the 3 characters are all over the track and they're kind of offbeat, Donald, Goofy, you know how Goofy runs. He runs like a weird duck. I don't know, it's weird. They run all weird. So that affects the way you kind of have to hit the note. So you have to play it almost faster than it needs to be, or slower, depending who gets to hit that enemy, which are the notes and stuff like that. And there are some fine parts to it, and there's some storylines that actually are affecting the main canonical Kingdom Hearts timeline. Obviously, this is set between This is set after 3, but specifically after 3's DLC, the Remind DLC, that not many people were a fan of. So it continues that kind of storyline. So it's just setting up. It isn't interstitial Kingdom Hearts game, but I cannot recommend this. Like, I do not ever want to play it. I thought I would go get the platinum, have fun, and reminisce, and I want to give it another shot. I don't know if I'm just being too critical of it, but I've played a lot of rhythm games. I played Amplitude, Rock Band, Guitar Hero, the Personas. I've played a lot of rhythm games, the Theatrhythm Final Fantasy DS rhythm games, and they all know that the biggest thing is input, hitting the notes on the right beat. And let me tell you, Kingdom Hearts completely missed that boat. I don't know why they thought this would work this way. The freedom of it, Sora, Donald, Goofy running all over the track for no reason, having to jump and then hit the note separately. It just really makes no sense. And it's disappointing because, again, the presentation's kind of nice when you launch the game, but everything else, the actual, I guess, meat and potatoes of the game doesn't work. And I'm super disappointed. I mean, I've been disappointed in Kingdom Hearts for a while now, but this just really took it down to another level.
Sounds like it needs a stinker award.
Oh yeah, I give it. I think it's the first game I'll use your term. This is the first stinker. This is my first stinker here. I know you have your Watch Dogs Legions.
Yeah.
Here's the second NeoVintage Stinker Award, and that's Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory or whatever. Melody of Memories.
At the end of the year, we can award all our stinkers formally.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've never been this disappointed in a Kingdom Hearts game.
Wow.
So yeah, that's all I've been playing. What have you been playing?
Okay, so yeah, I haven't been playing too much, and what I have played has mostly been actually Game Boy stuff. So firing up like Dragonborn and stuff like that last week has kind of got me into just messing with my Game Boy. So I've dabbled a little bit. Like I went back a little bit into Pokemon Crystal because that's my favorite from my childhood, and gave that maybe an hour or two, having a good time with that. Don't know if I'm like gonna complete any of these again. It's something I'm kind of just dabbling in lightly. And then I also randomly, speaking of Kingdom Hearts, did fire up Chain of Memories on the Game Boy, not the PS2 version.
Oh, okay.
And it's the first time I've like really played it in depth in like a while, like a really, really long time. And the only time I think I played it front to back was that initial playthrough I had on the Game Boy years and years ago, closer to its release. Because anytime I wanted to return back to that, I'm more likely to go to the Chain of Memories on PS2. So yeah, it's weird playing this. Well, first off, it doesn't feel like how I thought I remembered it feeling at all. It's the frame rate's way lower. The aspect, not the aspect ratio, but the perspective of the camera is way different. The layout of the rooms, like none of the. I realized a lot of my Chain of Memories, like memories, no pun intended, are actually the PS2 ones. Like, yeah. I don't have a lot of memories from this Game Boy one, so it's like really weird, and I don't love it. But at the same time, like I respect the hell out of it. The fact that they were literally able to make a Kingdom Hearts game work on the Game Boy, but it hasn't aged great. The card mechanic is very still interesting, but I think it gets a little convoluted, especially when you have to access certain rooms with certain level cards, and you have to use as like unlocking keys to get access to rooms, and sometimes there's like nothing in there, so you'll work super hard to get like a high level card to be able to access a room, and there's like nothing in there. So there are certain mechanics in this game that I'm like, thank God that they didn't like widely adopt this going forward, because it kind of just lives and breathes solely in this game. It hasn't really spilled over, and I'm kind of thankful for that, because there's certain aspects of it are absolutely terrible. But generally speaking, it's pretty interesting to see that approach on the Game Boy back then, and I like the little low res cutscene at the very beginning, where you see Hollow Bastion and everything like that. So
oh yeah, those are rough.
Yeah, like it's not until like so many years later that when you kind of fire up like the Game Boy videos and stuff like that, where you realize like how low resolution we were watching some of the stuff in. It's crazy. Because I have actually like 2 Game Boy videos. One's like a SpongeBob one, and one is like a mixed Nicktoons with like Rocket Power and Fairly Odd Parents and stuff like that. And I fired those guys up too, because again, I've just been messing with my Game Boy collection, just firing things up randomly. And my God, they're so pixely. And I'm like, did I really sit there and just watch this like this? It's just a cluster of like echoey audio and pixels, and I'm like, yeah, that's it right there, that gets it done. And I remember like wanting so bad to have the Sonic X and the Dragon Ball GT ones, and I just couldn't for the life get it to me because I was too broke. But in like retrospect, I'm like almost inclined to like buy them now because they're relatively inexpensive, and I just want to see how they look on the Game Boy. It's like comically bad.
That's I haven't thought about those in a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, and it doesn't really make that much sense, especially when you look at the timeline when it came out, and it's like there were more than enough options to watch video on the road at higher resolutions for similar price ranges. When you consider the buy-in of how much it costs to have like a Game Boy and stuff like that, portable DVD players existed. The original iPod I don't think existed yet, but it may have. And the video iPod, I'm pretty sure, did exist in some capacity and stuff like that. So there were much higher quality options. And then there's like the Video Now players and stuff like that. So I've been like experienced a lot of things that feel like really out of time lately. So it's been a weird week for me.
Well, good that format didn't stick around, luckily.
Yeah, like part of me almost wonders like how that would look like if they just started selling Switch videos. And they're just cartridges with 3 episodes on there, and they're just like, here you go, 3 episodes for $20.
Yeah, I'm assuming the PSP was the last one to do it with their
UMDs, yeah,
sort of. So I'm assuming that's probably the last time they tried that. But
yeah, physical media, video media is just not gonna be a thing anymore, and hasn't been for a very long time,
especially for portable.
Yeah, and it probably never should have been, to be honest. It doesn't make any sense.
That's true.
Especially like with the ability to watch things on your phone right now, full entire movies, high resolution. Some people have 4K phones and stuff like that. Like, there's literally nothing a handheld device could do better.
Yeah, in this day and age, I mean, we have devices, multiple devices. I've seen people whose cars can do that. So,
Tesla.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we can move into the first story because that's all I've been playing. And this is a pretty big one. So finally, we have a brand new Nintendo Direct. It's been a really long time since we've got one. I think the last one was sometime in like September, like 2019 or something like that, I believe they said. So it's been quite a while since we've got a full Nintendo Direct. We've got little drops here and there and indie showcases and stuff like that. But we got like a full 50-minute Direct. And we got some interesting announcements. So basically, this is the way we could do it. We can go basically point by point. If we have a point on it or any thoughts on it, cool, we can kind of explore that. If not, we can keep it pushing. And then at the end, we can give our like generalized thoughts on the Direct as a whole.
Okay.
So the first one, let's just start with Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. So kind of start out with Aonuma coming out, explaining that we're not going to have any Breath of the Wild news for now, but it's assumed that sometime this year they'll come back with some information about that. And so in the meantime, funny thing enough is they've almost got an annualized Zelda release schedule where you get something Zelda every single year. So it's very possible that Breath of the Wild might not even come out this year, and this might be their offering for the year. Very possible. But Skyward Sword HD, something that's been rumored a long time. Obviously, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess got released on the Wii U generation, and so it looks like they're going to finally take a look at Skyward Sword. They have the traditional controls with motion using the Joy-Cons, and then they have a more tactile approach using the joysticks for a more quote-unquote traditional experience, about as traditional as this game can get, just because of the way it's made and because, you know, directional slashes are kind of built into the network of the game. You can't just hit a single button output and slash like other Zelda games. It's just not designed that way, unfortunately for me. But this is a game that has an amazing story and will be awesome for a lot of people to be able to revisit. And a lot of people have been kind of held back by the fact that it's kind of just locked onto the Wii. So do you have any interest in this?
So, you know, I have an interest because this is the one Zelda game that I have not beaten, not including A Link's Awakening remake I have not beaten yet. But Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, like, I have not beaten. I do remember playing it on Wii. My brother had gotten it, and I watched him play most of it. I get it as the prequel to what a lot of Zelda story-wise is. And I'm excited to get more back into a more traditional Zelda. I think it's kind of difficult because I don't know that mechanic. Either mechanic, I'm definitely not playing with motion controls because ill. On top of that, the workaround, which is using the other stick, and I can't remember. I've played other games that did that, using that stick to do like the directional hits, and it's fine at first, but when the game starts getting crazy, you got multiple enemies and stuff like that. I don't know how well that's going to work and how well I want to, like, how I want to do that. So I will pick it up probably eventually. I don't know if that's going to be It's also not my favorite Zelda game from what I played, so I'm interested in it for the culture, and I'm glad it's here. I would have rather gotten Twilight again and Wind Waker again or something like that, or a nice little collection, which would have been nice, especially since it is the 35th anniversary for Zelda this year. It would have been nice to get something more than just Skyward Sword, and we still may. They could literally announce tomorrow random Zelda mini direct. So, but I think this is okay. It's gonna sell tons anyway because people love Zelda and are really dying for Zelda content.
Yeah, people have been asking for basically this for quite a while. A lot of people don't have the hangups with motion controls that we have. There are people who like genuinely love those kind of like Wii controls and stuff like that. So this is gonna be a no-brainer for them. I don't love the joystick solution. I don't love it. But it might be enough for me to be able to get through the game. I don't know if you remember. I tried to play this like maybe a year ago at this point. Broke out my Wii. I had a copy on disc, and I played this in its traditional format. And I just really found the whole thing very frustrating. The puzzles were fine. The art style was fine. The world I actually quite liked. The story was great. But just the way that action mechanics worked, and specifically stupid things that I hated, like the balance mechanism where you're walking across the rope. Like it's just a lot of gimmicks that I really didn't like, and so it felt like just a bunch of barriers to just being able to play the game. And I did also have an issue with it kind of feeling a little stiff in terms of like when you lock onto something and you're slashing something, but I didn't feel like enough robust amount of control over the character to be able to like roll in different directions and kind of have 360 views of my environment. You kind of lock on one enemy at a time, you kind of slash and try to hit it in certain target areas, and then kind of move on to the next enemy and try not to get hit in that process. And it seems like with the fact that this is going to be locked to a joystick, you're still not going to have that kind of camera control in the middle of the battle like that, which is unfortunate and in my opinion. But it's one of those things that because of the nature of its development, there's not much they can really do beyond assigning that to a button command or a joystick command and not just having it just motion. So it's fine enough. I might jump into it. I have to see where I am. I think do you know when this is set for? Is this July?
I think they just said July. I don't remember
if it's a summer game, depending on where I'm at and what I'm playing, then I probably will jump into this. I don't know if I'm jumping into this at launch, but I do intend on giving this a shot, see what they do, and hopefully I can get through it because I do want to experience this story front to back. There's just some constraints, obviously, with the mechanics.
Yeah, so do I.
I just don't love. So yeah, that's something. So far, I'm kind of like intrigued by it. Well, I wouldn't say a full thumbs up, but I'm intrigued. Mario Golf.
I'm always.
Oh, sorry. Go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just July 16th, 2021. Right.
Yeah,
so it is summer. But I don't remember. The only thing I'm trying to think, when's the new Ratchet game come out?
I would imagine around there.
Yeah, I know they gave it a date. Let me see, what date did they give it? Hopefully, I think it's June. Yeah, so that's June. So yeah, they're far apart.
Okay, yeah, so they have breathing room and everything like that. Yeah. And something tells me that there's not massive overlap. Like, I don't think that's an either or for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So next one, Mario Golf Super Rush. They showed off some interesting things. A lot for anybody who's played Mario Golf before, you saw a lot that was similar there. For people who've been thirsty for one, this seems like the game for you guys. They're giving you everything they've done before. Obviously, from my perspective, it takes a little bit of some cues from like a Everybody's Golf kind of situation. And it looks pretty good to me. It's Mario Golf. That's kind of what it is. I know you're pretty excited about this.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy the Mario Golf games. I mean, this goes back to playing. I've played most of them throughout. When I think there was one on 64. I played the Game Boy ones and stuff like that. I remember playing the 3DS one. I don't remember what they called it, but I think Open Season or something. I played that for tons of time. I also think I went on a trip or something like that, so I was on the plane a lot when that game came out, or at least when I got the game originally. So I played it. So I love it. I usually enjoy Mario sports games a lot. I know the last tennis one wasn't that great because they try to shove a lot of story and RPG mechanics into the stupidness. Just to, I guess, try to keep it fresh. When that's not really what we want. We want the hardcore, mechanics that work well. So I'm hoping this doesn't go off, off the course, no pun intended, off the course, and kind of sticks to its roots. Like, I don't mind them always adding like a small little story element and stuff like that, but I just want to be able to play 18 holes of straight up golf without like battling and without these weird boss battles that they added in the tennis game. Again, we haven't seen too much. We saw like the bare bones, but I kind of want to see more bare bones. I want to see more of the original game that's there. With also, I understand they want to keep it fresh, but I just don't want these dumb add-ons that nobody likes.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to mention. Is it seems like Mario sports titles always kind of have to strike this weird balance of staying true to their roots and satisfying traditional players while simultaneously not making the same game over and over again. Yeah. And so they tend to err on the side of some gimmick, something about it that differentiates it from previous ones. And they've even dabbled with it, like, for example, with Mario Kart, with Double Dash. They kind of throw different things in there to see what works, see what sticks, so you can see, like, okay, so this one on this generation was the classic one. And then they threw this one, which is this mechanic. And each generation will have its own kind of mechanic to differentiate it. Eventually, probably to the point where people think it gets so convoluted that they'd like basically an up-res version of the original. And then that seems to happen a lot. So, from an outsider's perspective, this one looks pretty traditional, with the exception for that little running mini game thingy that they added there. But for the most part, it looks pretty consistent with the general Mario sports theme. There's no crazy new characters, no new skin. It's not taking place in a new place. It's traditional environments, traditional characters playing traditional golf. So I would imagine for a lot of people that's going to be kind of a breath of fresh air, and for some people it's probably going to turn them off to it and be like, what is this any different than the game we've seen 3 or 4 previous times? Yeah. So it's not going to be for everybody, but it couldn't hurt to have higher resolution, better performing Mario sports games. There's always going to be a market for that, so I'm mad at it.
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah, the next one, rather controversial, I guess, to some people. Mithra and Pyra, I believe it's pronounced, from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, are coming to Smash. And I don't know much about fighting games or Smash characters, but from what I understand, this is actually like one character that can swap between the two, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And
there's always a lot of speculation about who is coming to Smash. Obviously, you see the same names thrown over and over again. The big one, I think, this time was obviously Sora. It was probably thrown around the most of what people were hoping for. And I would imagine some people are happy about this, some people not so much. But I don't know the general temperature on the fighting game community. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more in tune with that, obviously. Yeah. The main issue, it's not that they're from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because people really like that game. And it didn't really strike me when I played it originally. I do want to go back to it. I think the issue is that it's the same issue if Sora was added into the game. It's just another anime style sword fighter, and that's the main issue. It's not that they're women. It's luckily I'm surprised that wasn't a thing, because I actually think the game does need more women and stuff like that. I think when you have the speculation, and I guess it's people hyping themselves up with Crash Bandicoot, has been a name constantly, and then they just announced that Crash 4 was coming to Switch and stuff. So the timing seemed right. Rayman is a constant one, that especially with Ubisoft and Nintendo working so well. So when we get more sword fighters, it's just it's like a big sigh, like more. It's more. Like at this point, it's just a sword fighting game. You have 13 Fire Emblem characters. You have and then you have Sephiroth, Cloud. You just have a lot of sword fighters, and now they're gonna give us a 2-in-1, which is something they've stayed away from, because of the original Smash 4 when it came to 3DS and Wii U. The 3DS couldn't handle the 2-in-1 characters, which is why they split Sheik and Zelda and all those characters like that. Samus and Zerus, either, right? And Ice Climbers was eliminated because they said they couldn't get two sprites working at the same time, which doesn't make sense because they had Duck Hunt and Dog, it's two different characters that run in one, so there's a lot of weirdness there. But in Ultimate they're all coming back and stuff, but they all stayed separate. They didn't reunite Zelda and Sheik, they didn't reunite Zero Suit and Samus, so why are these two characters put together? And that's kind of the consensus. People are like, well, why did they get super special treatment? Yeah. So people are upset because it's not the people they wanted. People are upset because it is. I know they're a little bit different. They have gear, swords, and stuff like that, but they're practically just more sword fighters, and that's really the main issue. When you have such a vast cast of characters that are with their companies willing to put them in and way more interesting and have better movesets and more unique movesets, you give us more sword fighters, which is what is kind of depressing.
Yeah, from an outsider's perspective, I kind of just... But I do have investment in like what characters they add, because it's just entertaining to me to see this roster like grow to like such a ridiculous size. And yeah, just seeing this, I was kind of like, okay. And I was like, I don't know what the temperature is like for this game. I know people like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for sure. I know it has the fan base. I hear it's a quite good game. But I had no clue about like it was kind of like when they and I forget his name, but there's this random fighting game character that they just randomly threw in there. That was King of Fighters, I think he's from. And I was kind of like, okay, well, if
Terry Bogard.
Yeah, again, not mad at it, but I was just like, okay, well, I don't know if there's literally any demand for this, but
yeah,
I suppose there's a fan base somewhere out there for that. So yeah, hey, more Smash characters, and I don't think this is the end of it, right? Because they announced a new fighter pack or something like that. A new season.
This is part of the same. This is part of the same pack. I believe there is.
Oh, really?
One more.
Oh, wow, they're still dropping those.
This is still Fighter Pack 2.
Oh, okay.
The first one.
So I'd imagine they'd go out with a bang with this last one.
That's what people thought for the Fighter Pass 1, and it was just a Fire Emblem character, so there's no excitement anymore.
Well, let me not jinx it for you guys. So next one, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity DLC. Not a ton of new information about that. They dropped a little still image of all the different stuff, and to me it echoes a lot of what they did with Breath of the Wild. So not really for me, but there is going to be additional story and characters added to the game. Is this something you'd buy?
Probably not. I really don't usually, for all these Muso games, I usually never get the passes because it's usually just here's another character and another map. It doesn't really add anything. It's like the One Piece Warrior games. I never get the things to play as like Big Mama and stuff like that. So it's fine that it's there for more people. Maybe one day I get really into it. I haven't even beaten the game.
Yeah,
just because that mechanic is just so tiring. I'm not in the mood to be jumping into more of that crowd fighting.
And then probably the next pretty large announcement of this Nintendo Direct was Splatoon 3. So this one's a very interesting one. I had a lot of fun with Splatoon 2, specifically the story component, because to me it gave me the most energy I've seen of something like a Mario Sunshine in a very long time. It was like that weird water-based 3D platforming that I had a good time with, and so I enjoyed it. And the whole spraying mechanism, it felt very Mario Sunshine to me, and I had a lot of fun with it. And so Splatoon 3 is a very interesting thing where it's like, it makes a lot of sense. Timeline-wise, it's not actually that soon. It's been a number of years since Splatoon 2, so I saw some people being like, it's been too soon, where it's actually been a couple years. I don't know if the gap between Splatoon 2 and 3 is that much smaller than the gap between 1 and 2, but it is an awkward thing to see something with a very similar aesthetic, similar character design, similar environments on the exact same console as the previous one. I think that's probably what makes it feel like it's been no time at all. But I had a good time with Splatoon 2. This one seems to keep the more grungy aesthetic that we saw in the DLCs of 2. So this one's going to probably differentiate a little bit from the second one, but we don't have much information other than kind of just a little train sequence and some outside stuff, and then you kind of see this kind of hub world environment that I've seen multiple people point to different places. Some people are like, "Oh, it looks like Hong Kong." Some people say that it looks kind of like the Yakuza place. So there's I've seen a lot of different comparisons to what that is. But do you have any interest in this game?
Yeah, I'm actually a pretty big Splatoon fan. Okay. So I enjoyed it. The original on Wii U. Thought it was fun. I thought it was a nice new idea. I like when Nintendo likes to do new IPs well, instead of just like redoing it. Like most Mario games are the exact same story, and stuff like that. So I enjoyed that. So that was actually 2015. I'm looking at the dates. Splatoon 2 then released in 2017.
Okay, so that's a 2-year gap.
So a 2-year gap, and that means Splatoon 3 is set to release in 2022.
Yeah.
So it's actually gonna be the biggest gap. That's gonna be a 5-year gap.
Exactly. It's just weird for it to be on the same console, probably.
I think it's weird that it's gonna be on the same console. Probably is what people were maybe assuming. Also, Splatoon was just upheld with so much content for a while.
Yeah.
But the final Splatfest, whatever it was, is what it's been. I think 2 years since they've done any real updates to this. So I'm excited for it. I like some of the little customizations. I see you have like a little companion now you can customize.
Yeah.
That sort of Mad Max style beginning shows that maybe continuing off the last Splatfest, which was like Chaos versus Order. And that was the same thing with Splatoon 1. The last Splatfest was the two singers against each other.
Yeah.
And then the winner ended up going to popularity, and that's like was the story in Splatoon 2. So that seems to continue its pattern. But until we see more, I'm like, is this really more of the same? In another year, do I want to play that when I really just have Splatoon 2? I'm sure the story will be actually really fun, and the multiplayer usually surprisingly gets me. At least for a month or two until people get super crazy good at it. But I'm excited that they're continuing this.
Yeah, I have faith in this one. It's been quite some time. They seem pretty receptive to feedback, and they always, I feel like, do right by their fan base for the most part, and they have a steady stream of content and new events happening for their fan base in a way that you don't see with a lot of these games, especially out of the Nintendo ecosystem. It's very like this is Nintendo's kind of online offering, and they do it well in my opinion. So I'm not mad at it. I'm curious to see. I hope they don't abandon the story stuff. It doesn't seem like they are. That was my favorite part of Splatoon 2. Exactly. And that's what allowed me to keep playing it, because I just loved those the challenges and the different levels that they offered, and the very low level, not super in depth, not super lore heavy narrative, but I enjoyed it still, and I love the general aesthetic of this game again, because again it's one of the few games I feel like that evokes the generation that me and you both love, of that kind of like Jet Set Radio era. It gives me a lot of Dreamcast vibes, so that's why I kind of have like a soft spot in my heart for the Splatoon series, because it's just it's kind of like the last one of that era, that kind of like edgy street culture, like spray paint culture, like that urban scene thing that has since kind of died out, and even Sonic at one point was kind of like tapping into that. So they're kind of the last of the Mohicans in that regard. So I'm glad to see them still doing well. So next up, we got a whole bunch of ports here. We got Fall Guys, Outer Wilds, Legend of Mana, Tales of the Borderlands, Stubbs the Zombie for some reason. Stubbs the Zombie, Plants vs. Zombies, Battle for Neighborville, and Miitopia from the 3DS are all getting ports. So some that I don't care too much about, some that I think are very interesting. Fall Guys was a no-brainer. That's also coming to Xbox. Stubbs the Zombie, though, from the original Xbox. Interesting. What do you think about that?
So this so most of these games, before I get into the stubs, besides Miitopia, all these games are either already out on other systems or will be also released on other systems. Like the Fall Guys thing. Afterwards, of course, they want to announce it's also coming to Xbox and stuff. So it's interesting. Tales of the Borderlands that just got re-released digitally due to the whole Telltale's thing. That just got released everywhere. Legend of Mana, they tweeted out, it's coming to like PS4, Steam, and everything. And Battle for Neighborville or whatever, that released when I was working at GameStop, which has been years at this point. So it's been some time. Stubbs the Zombie. When I saw that, I looked at it, I'm like, do I know this? And I want to say I was at the doctor's, and I was like Googling it, and I'm like, why do I know this? And I had to look it up. And what was the original one called? So this is a 2005. Stubbs the Zombie and a Rebel Without a Pulse. It was just wild to see that this is a thing, and it was interesting. I don't know why it's there. I'm never mad at these weird, quirky games coming back. You never know what you remember, don't remember. So it's interesting to see Stubbs back, but the rest of these games were kind of like, I was just like, okay, I'm not getting Miitopia. Let's be honest. Nobody bought it on 3DS. I'm not going to pay $50 on Switch to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing like Tomodachi Life and stuff like that. So I did kind of mess around with some of those 3DS games, but nah, I didn't get to Miitopia. I'm not mad at any of these. Legend of Mana, though, the one thing is I actually like Legend of Mana. I like those Legend games quite a bit. I've dabbled in a couple of them. I hate what Square keeps doing to these games, though, where they keep playing around with the sprites versus the backgrounds, and they try to up-res the background, like, and they have the weird pixel art sitting on these weird drawn animation. It looks awful, and they keep doing this. They did it with a lot of the Final Fantasy games, especially on the phone and Steam, where, like, if you wanted to just play Final Fantasy VI as is, like, you go to buy it, and it's this BS ugly-looking one that I'm like, I don't know why they keep doing this. Like, they have the weird hate for pixel art that we saw in, like, the early 2000s, where nobody wanted to do that, and it's like, oh, 3D is the future. I remember that being a thing where nobody wanted to do pixel art games. Yeah. And it's like, the fast forward to now, we have this resurgence of pixel art games. Everybody loves it. It's beautiful, awesome, Cyber Shadow. And then you still got Square, where it's like, no, we're going to draw it and make it look ugly and trash. And the pixel, the sprites don't match the backgrounds. It's awful. And I wish they would stop doing that to games, because they're messing up really great games otherwise. Yeah,
for sure. At least give us the option to switch it on and off.
Exactly. Yeah, hey, if you want to have a modern version for people, yeah, knock yourself out. But I don't know why they keep butchering the visual styles of games that looked gorgeous to begin with. The next one, Samurai Warriors 5. It's a Musou game. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, Dynasty, but now it's Samurai Warriors. Never played any of these. Not really my thing. It looks like every other Musou game to me, but, I mean, bless Koei Tecmo. They're doing cool things over there. I know there is a fan base for these games, but it's just not me. Do you have any interest in that?
No, not really. I mean, again, it's, for these Musou games, it depends what skin they put on it, and as much as I love samurais, I don't want to just do samurai slashing. I'll play Ghost of Tsushima instead.
Pretty much. Famicom Detective Club. It's basically a visual novel that they're bringing to Switch. Not much to report there. I don't think you have anything to say about that. It's like 2 games or something like that. Do you want to play that?
No. I looked into it after they announced it, because I guess these are Famicom games that never came over here. I'm like, that's cool. When there's a locked game from Japan that finally gets over here, I'm sure there's some sort of fan base, but
I'm
not for me. Not for me. Yeah.
We got Capcom Arcade Club Stadium. People didn't seem to care too much about this. I'm always cool with the retro collections. I'm not mad at it. They had some cool stuff in there. Some really dope games. I don't know if I'm gonna buy it, but it's something that's out there for you guys that want it. They definitely had some games that interest me for sure.
Yeah, so I actually talked about this before. I don't remember where, but it's interesting. The way they're doing it, so the actual arcade stadium is free as a download.
Okay.
And then you can buy the generations, like the decades. So it'd be like I think it's $15, and you can buy the specific decade of games you want. So you can slowly, get. There's a bundle. I think there's a bundle for like 45 or something like that. That ends up being cheaper. Yeah. But I do like that there's like, well, if you actually specifically just want this decade of games, it's like $15.99,
and
it
not too bad.
Works as an add-on and stuff like that. So it's interesting how they're doing it. Yeah, me and you obviously love these retro games, so eventually I probably would like to get all of them, or but it's a lot easier to just slowly buy $15.99 for a set of games, which is cool because some of these are really fun.
Did the free version come with anything, or is it just the marketplace where you can buy things?
I think it comes with a game. I'm not 100% sure.
Got you. Next one, Neon White. Kind of interesting looking game. I didn't love what I saw from the gameplay. That kind of first person view is just really not my thing. But I did like the general aesthetic they were going for. Do you remember this game?
I have to look up pictures of it right now because I don't remember. Oh, okay, yeah. I like the style. It's very cool looking. I just didn't really get what it was like beat for beat, but it's one of those things I'll keep kind of my eye on. I just don't really get it.
Yeah, it's not my thing. At first I was like, oh, they got me. This kind of looks kind of interesting, but by the time I saw the gameplay, just nah. Project Triangle Strategy. First off, awful name, but I can't even blame them because it's the Octopath Traveler people, so it doesn't surprise me at all. I loved Octopath Traveler. Never beat it because it's just multiple characters, lots of story. It is what it is. But I had a great time with it. I'm like obsessed with the visual style of that, and I'm so glad to see it back in some capacity. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this one has more of like a tactics kind of feel, tactics and Disgaea, those kind of battle mechanism. A little bit of Fire Emblem, sure. So it's probably not as much for me in terms of like just the battle mechanics. I definitely prefer like a turn-based style, but it looks pretty amazing. I was like dying at the title. I'm like, why did they name their games like this? I don't understand. But what do you think of it?
Yeah, coming from the title, when Project Octopath Traveler ended up just being Octopath Traveler.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty certain Project Triangle Strategy is just going to be
Triangle
called
Strategy.
Triangle Strategy.
Yeah.
I'm not huge into the Final Fantasy Tactic games. I'm more interested, weirdly enough, to see people talk about them and watch them and stuff like that. I think this style may not be as resonant as what they did for Octopath Traveler, especially since you've had games like Fell Seal and stuff kind of do this to a whole new level. I'm curious what this is going to kind of do newer, or I guess better, if anything.
Yeah. One thing I would say, they definitely have the leg up in terms of just visual aesthetics. Fell Seal, amazing game, about as good as you can do a tactics game, pretty much, from a mechanic standpoint. But obviously, this game, just that visual style is just different. Like, it just hits different. So
yeah,
I would imagine that's going to give them that natural leg up too, and just that connection to the Nintendo ecosystem with Square. What Square did with Octopath Traveler is going to definitely give them a leg up and get more eyes on the product. So I hope this product does well, because I want to see a lot more of these, and I would love to see this become kind of a new, like with the Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests, the Bravely, what I'm imagining that's going to turn into. I would love to see whatever you call this franchise continue on, with each game having different mechanics, but a kind of a uniting visual style. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Be cool.
Next one we have little to no information on, but we do got to look at it, or like the logo. We got Star Wars Hunters. I mean, I'm always down to take a look at a Star Wars game, but I don't know what this is. Did it say it was free to play? I think they mentioned that.
I think they mentioned that. Now I'm confused, actually. But I think... So the reason I did not get excited at all is because I was like, well, this sounds like a mobile game. They did... EA and everyone's talked about how they were going to focus a lot of time on these Star Wars mobile games. I don't play any of those sort of gotcha, collect a hero type deal. I don't know what this could be.
Yeah, I think it's like a shooter or something like that. But yeah, we'll talk more about that when we get more information. Next one, Knockout City. It seems like it's like a dodgeball game or something like that. They had some interesting characters for the promotional material, but the game itself, to me, looks like another mid multiplayer battle arena game. Like, it's not for me. Do you have any interest in this?
Not at all. I was interested in the commercial because that's the one where they had like World of Warcraft looking guy.
They had everybody.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then it's like, oh, it's sort of this dodgeball game. I'm like, oh, no. I was like, Destruction All-Stars. I was like, no, thanks.
Yeah, it seems more like a marketing thing than actually what you get to use in the game. World's End Club. Normally, this is probably a game I wouldn't care too much about, other than the fact that it does have an attachment to the team from Danganronpa, which is one of my favorite franchises, period. So because of that, I'm like, okay, I got to give this game a chance. From a gameplay style, it looks very different. But from just a general character design and layout of the game, it definitely evokes that exact same energy. And because it's that team, I don't know who the writer is for this, so I don't know if it's going to have a lot of that kind of weird, campy, despair, dark, edgy kind of vibe to it that Danganronpa has. But I'm definitely going to check it out just because, again, it's attachment to Danganronpa. And because those games are so good, something like this, I would imagine, would hit pretty good too. Do you have any interest?
Yeah, obviously, being such a huge fan of those guys as well, I'm interested in it. Again, it looks a little bit more chibi and style like that. I think this is out on... I know it's out on like Apple Arcade, but I don't know if it's out in Apple Arcade in America yet. So I think the Switch may be the sort of gateway into this, over here into the West. But I don't know. But I'm interested to see what it is, because Danganronpa caught me by surprise, and I love those games. So who knows? Yeah,
definitely. Next one, Ninja Gaiden Master Collection. The moment they showed them, I was like, oh, a Ninja Gaiden Collection. These 3D ones are like not my cup of tea. I vastly prefer the 2D ones, so not for me. They're like brutally difficult. So good luck to anyone who wants to jump into it. If you like them Souls-like challenge and you're done with Sekiro and stuff like that, yeah, give these a shot. Good luck. But yeah, they're brutal, and got a lot of respect for these games, but it's just not my era of Ninja Gaiden that I like. Would you play these?
So, at first when I saw this, I was like, man, I would prefer this on other consoles. This is coming to PlayStation and Xbox as well.
Okay.
The only one I'm good at is 3, because 3 they made a whole lot easier. It's way more... It's way more Devil May Cry than it is Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2.
Gotcha.
So... I don't know. I just kind of don't know. It's like, I won't be able to beat 1 and 2, and I own 3 already, like on 4 consoles, because it keeps being given away for free. So
Gotcha. Yeah, I see it on Xbox all the time. So
Yeah.
And then the last one that actually kind of interests me is Saga Frontier. I love those PS1 sci-fi RPGs when they're playing around with that, and so I definitely am interested in this. Whether or not I jump into this is entirely dependent on what the price proposition is for it, but hey, if they offer it, $15-20 on Switch, I'm not mad at it. I'll give it a shot because I love this era RPGs. Do you have any interest in Saga Frontier?
Yeah, so I'm interested in the Saga games in general. It's always been weird because I always get them very confused and stuff like that, because Saga Frontier was I think one of the first ones I played. But yeah, depending when and how much it comes out, I definitely will give it a shot.
Yeah, if they drop the full 60, we're not doing that. But just whenever I see like the visuals kept as is and a decent price proposition, I am mad at it, especially from that era. It makes me like want them to bring back like Star Ocean and stuff like that. There's a lot of amazing games from that era that I feel like they can play around with. So I'm always happy about older ports like this, as long as the price proposition's right.
Exactly. So we'll have to see. All right, so that was it for the Nintendo Direct, the first Nintendo Direct in I follow a Twitter account. It was like 500 something days.
Jeez, hopefully it's not that long until the next one.
So it better not be. They won't be able to use COVID as an excuse anymore. But we got some new rumors and some new stories. So Konami and Silent Hill, which has kind of been a thing now for a while, ever since the whole PT situation. But we got some interesting Konami news / rumors this week. Video Games Chronicles has asserted that Japanese publisher Konami plans to outsource its Metal Gear Solid and Castlevania franchises for other developers to use. And this really comes off the back of them reworking and kind of telling people that they're still kind of focused and will have a focus in doing video games. So any new entries in the two series are years away from now, but bosses at the company are said to be more open to the idea of letting external teams work on the IPs following the poor performance of Metal Gear Survive and Contra Rogue Corps. And those games are both terrible. They're lucky they didn't release while we were doing this, because they'd get some stinkers for sure.
Stinker awards.
Yeah, they would get from Metal Gear Survive. They also suggest that Konami might be preparing 2 different reboots of Silent Hill, with one already in development at a Japanese studio. Bloober Team, developer of the medium, could potentially be working on the other, with CEO Piotr Babino confirming that the studio has been working on a horror IP from a very famous gaming publisher. Video Game Chronicle reports that Konami previously approached Until Dawn developer Supermassive Games to develop a Silent Hill entry, but plans fell through and the deal was never signed. So some interesting stuff, all kind of good news for Silent Hill fans. And I guess Metal Gear, we'll see what happens with Metal Gear. I think Bloober Team, maybe I'd be interested to see what they can do for a Silent Hill kind of reboot and stuff. Like, what can Silent Hill do in their hands, especially playing off the medium. Why a lot of the stuff I had issues with that game, but a lot of the highs were pretty high, and interested in that format. I would have really loved to see a story-based Silent Hill come from Supermassive. That's probably never going to happen now, but I would have loved to see that. So how did you take this news?
Yeah, very interesting. So obviously the medium team makes a lot of sense. Bloober Team, I guess their name is. Because I think both you and I both made the comparison to Silent Hill once we started the medium. It definitely gave that very similar energy. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Controls very similar. Obviously, they're inspired a lot from that era as well, with that kind of fixed camera kind of look. So it makes a lot of sense. With them outsourcing plans to other publisher or other developers, I'm not mad at it. Konami doesn't seem to have full investment in actually producing high quality games anymore. So them allowing their IPs to go outward, I'm not mad at it. However, be very careful with who you give those things to. Metal Gear Solid, obviously, a massive franchise with a very high standard, quality standard, because of those Kojima days. So they got to be very careful with what they do that, because it's naturally going to be compared to a franchise that is damn near perfect. So be very careful. And I would say the same with Castlevania. It's very near and dear to my heart. Obviously, that's probably my favorite franchise of all time. And I just wonder what Konami and the teams that they're possibly talking to have an interest of doing with Castlevania. Are they looking at Bloodstained and they're like, okay, so the 2D direction is what we need to tap into? Or are they looking at the Lords of Shadow era and be like, we might be able to get that right? I don't know. And that, for me is what's going to kind of make it break it for me. I don't like the Lords of Shadow games, but I know some people do. It's really not my thing. So depending on what they choose to do with Castlevania and what they see the future of that being, will kind of make it or break it for me. Obviously, the show, killing it, amazing. I would be surprised if some of the narrative structure that were set up during the show doesn't bleed into this game in some kind of way. You know what I mean? Like the show was inspired by the classic games, which these new games I would imagine be inspired by the show, kind of bringing it full circle. So I hope to see good things from the Castlevania in the future, and I just hope that they give it to the right teams. Preferably, I'd like a Bloodstained like look at Symphony and Night, and maybe find a good team to be able to play around with that. I'm thinking maybe go to the guys, the people who made Blasphemous?
Yes.
I'm thinking if I'm just making a new Castlevania game, I'm going straight to them. Those guys are no freaking joke. Either those guys or the guys who made Dead Cells are like ridiculously good. And they know how to do sprite art. They know how to do Metroidvanias like nobody else in the modern thing. So I ain't mad at it. And then obviously if they want to do 2D, there's lots of people who they can, go talk to for that. So I'm hoping for good things. I'm curious to see what they have for Metal Gear Solid. I'm curious if they're more interested in a reboot of to remake 1 would be strange because obviously there's Twin Snakes. So it's technically already been done. But I guess they could do it again if they wanted to. Are they interested in continuing that story that Kojima set up? I don't know. There's a lot of baggage that they inherit from that. Everything down to who's voicing Snake is a controversial thing these days. So it's a tricky, very delicate balance for them to do. And in terms of Silent Hill, the Bloober team makes a lot of sense. Personally, if I want a new Silent Hill game, I'd like the other one to go to maybe Tango. Just because the Evil Within is just so amazing. So I feel like they could absolutely destroy a Silent Hill game. But I understand for many logistical reasons why that would never happen. But that's who I would go to for it. So that was basically my thoughts. I'm happy for it right now, but it's kind of like I'm waiting with bated breath to see where the catch is. And I want to see who they choose, because I could also see Kojima giving it to a really not great team. I could also see that happening too, knowing Kojima. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
So I guess we can move on to the next story. This was quite the controversy, and I just wanted to mention it really quick. We don't have to spend a lot of time here, but we spoke last week about the return of the canceled FPS 6 Days in Fallujah. So it's back in the news this week. According to 6 Days in Fallujah's publisher, Victura, the recently resurrected military FPS based on the real Iraq war battle is not attempting to make a political commentary about whether the war itself was a good or a bad idea. And naturally, that kind of centrist, apolitical approach is not resonating with a lot of people, especially with something as controversial as the Iraq battle, because at this point, we're looking at things very retrospectively, with with hindsight, pretty much. And so this has disappointed a lot of people who feel like an apolitical approach is a bit tone deaf and misses a unique opportunity to explore different perspectives and tell the story of the real human costs of the war, specifically on the civilian front. We're talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of civilians dead in this conflict. So I'm going to link down below a Twitter thread by Rami Ismail, who offers a very unique perspective about this. And so I wanted to put this story in there because last week we did speak about this. Basically on releasing the game logistical style, not so much on the story itself. But I felt like to be kind of fair and balanced, we should offer both perspectives. And there are people who are very not happy about this, and it has nothing to do with the actual performance of the game itself, and the actual gameplay, and more to do with what they're choosing to do narratively, and not so much about it being objectionable to show war that actually happened in real time, but more so because they feel like they're being insensitive to the other side. And I felt like that was a perspective worth exploring. So did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was interesting enough because when I saw this back in the sort of news head, it's like when you come out and say that you're not making a political statement with anything, not even a game, but in any project, I'm not making a political statement with this, that is a political statement in itself. So I thought it was kind of talking in circles, trying to just kind of calm people down. I think they would have been better off just not saying anything, releasing listen, we're sticking to the vision, that we had, and we're sticking to the message that we had, whether it be a political commentary or not. Just stick to your vision. Stick to what you're not resurrecting a game this later. It's this so late now to take the same nonsense again. So it's an interesting story that shouldn't really be, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where they are trying to take an apolitical stance, obviously because they don't want to get in trouble and they don't want to deal with the blowback. It gives me very much like Ubisoft vibes. They kind of straddle that fence too. But it's one of those things that when you're dealing with war and military-based things, specifically in America with what the military-industrial complex is, and I'm not going to get too political with it, when you make media around that without the full context of what actually happened or what the human cost was or what other people's perspectives are or what actually happened, when you just try to tell this story from one perspective and for the sake of not wanting to be overly political, you don't explore the other side, you're basically just creating basically like military propaganda at that point, which in and of itself is a political statement. So it's one of those things where you can't take an incredibly hot button issue that has real world implications right now to this day for many, many people, Americans included, who maybe have family members on both sides affected by this conflict. You can't just kind of sit in the middle of that and throw your hands up and put your hands over your ears and be like, we don't want to get in trouble, we don't want to take a stance on that. It's like, well, you chose a really hot button issue to try to be apolitical about. So if you want, do something like Battlefield, do something like Call of Duty does, but to choose a very hot button issue like this, or that's like trying to make a game about the Vietnam conflict and it's like, we're not going to explore the civil rights stuff and we're not going to do the political part of it. It's like this, like it's an inherently political conflict, so there's no real way to play that middle zone. It doesn't make any sense. So
absolutely.
I figured it was worth mentioning because that's something that's kind of going around on Twitter quite a bit, and I felt like it's important to offer both perspectives. So if you want, go check out the link down below, and there's a whole long thread that explores his ideas, and I think he kind of sums it up really, really well. And some people agree with him, some people disagree with him, but that's kind of the nature of the discourse, and I felt like it was important for us to at least highlight that.
No, absolutely. It's something that we did need to discuss, especially since it kind of continues off what we were worried about a little bit last week.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So last story for today. The canceled N64 game Dinosaur Planet has leaked. Rare's canceled game Dinosaur Planet, which would eventually be overhauled and released as Star Fox Adventures for GameCube, has leaked in its original state online. The game was planned for the Nintendo 64, and much of its DNA still exists in Star Fox Adventures, hence the game's major difference from the rest of the series. Shared by Nintendo historian Forest of Illusion on Twitter and spotted by Video Games Chronicles, Dinosaur Planet is fully playable via this leaked version. Though the account said it won't run perfectly on emulators, the build seems to be from after Nintendo had already decided to mix in elements from Star Fox. As you can see, one of the screenshots of the main character look, it's Fox McCloud. We can be honest.
Yeah.
But the game was still called Dinosaur Planet at this point, so I guess this was the transitional stage. I looked a little bit more into it, and the guy who leaked it, I don't know if he's officially out there that he leaked it, but he says he just bought the game off, I believe, an Australian collector who had it on a disc.
Oh.
So it's not like it was like stolen. It wasn't the guy. I don't know who this guy had. He had it on a disc, put it on the computer, but obviously ripped it, and it'll start making the rounds, and it'll soon be available everywhere. It's interesting. I'm curious. I haven't looked at much of the screenshots besides the screenshots from the certain articles. I haven't looked at gameplay of it. I'm curious how much is just Star Fox Adventures or how much Star Fox Adventures just is this canceled game. So I'm just kind of interested in that little aspect of it. I'm not probably gonna play it. I didn't like Star Fox Adventures that much, due to the fact that it wasn't a Star Fox game, because of this weird transition. But history-wise, we knew this, that Fox Adventures was this canceled Dinosaur Planet game. I don't think we've ever seen screenshots, and now basically the game is out there. So it is interesting to see history-wise. Rare's such a weird company that I'm surprised. I don't even know if they've even made jokes about this yet, or if they're going to try to take legal action. Who knows? Because it's been so long that I don't even know if they have any stakes in this. But for history and collecting wise, it's really cool to see what the original idea was that morphed into Star Fox Adventure. So I'm actually kind of excited to look into this.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is, like, Star Fox Adventures has always had that kind of like Mario 2 energy of being like the whole reskin with Doki Doki Panic type situation, where you could tell like at one point it was something else and then it was turned into this. So yeah, Star Fox Adventures has always kind of stood out as kind of a different thing than the rest of the franchise, and you could tell that came from somewhere. So it didn't surprise me at all to get a little bit more information, kind of look at it. But I mean, yeah, just looking at the footage, it's very much a game of that era. Not really my era, so I'm not going to really jump super hard to check out a lot of these games. And I don't think I even have a working emulator that I'd be able to run this. I only have really Super Nintendo and NES emulators, so I can play like untranslated games that never got brought to the States or whatever, that I can't find on cart or whatever. So those are the only emulators I have, so I won't be able to play it, but I'm going to hopefully be able to find some like video material so I can take a better look at what they were trying to do in this game. But listen, I don't play a lot of those N64 games, to be honest with you. Anybody who knows me knows that that's not really my era. I like goof on that era a lot. So looking at these games, like, I could have sworn, I'm like, I don't know, is that Banjo? It all looks the same to me. So I was like looking at the tree and I was like, is this not a game that came out? Okay, it looks like one to me.
Yeah, it was pretty much, from what we saw, it was very furry Legend of Zelda
Is
style,
this Conkers? But yeah, so if you're interested in any of this game's footage or anything like that, we're gonna link the story down below so you can be able to check that out. But I figured tack on the story, since the retro show hasn't been going on or anything like that, we could tack on the stories here and there. So I guess we could jump into a pretty fun loose topic that we're gonna be able to do.
Yeah.
So we're gonna basically be able to take a look at the Switch 4 years later, and there's a couple reasons for that. So this was released back in March 3rd of 2017, and so within a week or two from now, we're going to actually hit the 4-week anniversary. So I wanted to give us a chance to be able to kind of take a look back and offer our thoughts about that. And the main reason why I wanted to do this story, additional to the anniversary coming up, is the fact that I randomly decided to go on Wikipedia, and I was like, you know what, how much has the Switch sold at this point? Because I haven't checked in on it for quite a while. And according to Wikipedia, as of right now, they've sold 79.87 million units, which is like, wow, holy crap. I had no clue they were that high at all. And so I kind of pulled up a map or not a map, but like a list of the million selling game consoles. And so right now it's sitting right under the PSP. So it's past the 3DS family, which was at 75. So it's right below the PSP, which is at 80 to 82. So it's guaranteed that it's going to blow past that. And so you get the big jumps pretty much between the PS3 and the Wii, which jumps from 87.4 to 101. And I feel like that is going to be the major hurdle for the Switch to clear. Like, could it sell another 20 million units? Most likely, yes. Especially the fact that it sells like a handheld. But I felt like it was worth taking a look at this past generation of Nintendo has had, which was a lifesaver for them, because it reminded you, coming off of the Wii U, they were in rough shape. But they always had like kind of like a massive pool of capital to be able to survive on. So it's not like Nintendo had an existential existence kind of in danger. But there was a lot of talk about whether they have to go third party after the Wii U was such a flop. So seeing this console succeed at such a high percentage is a really interesting and like a pretty amazing thing. So your thoughts on the Switch, just generally, what are your thoughts on the Switch?
Yeah, I mean, so the Switch, before it released, even after I snagged my pre-orders, I was worried. I was like, I don't think this is going to be the lifesaver it needs to be. I'll be honest, I was a little negative on it. I said, because all they were hyping up at the time were ports of Wii U games, rumors of GameCube games that most of them never even appeared, and things like that. So I was like, well, what's going on that this is what we're excited for, to play old Nintendo games? Obviously, and I, from the get-go, I thought the control scheme was okay. I'm not huge into motion, but I'm sure, I remember the first day I got it, obviously I messed with the motion controls and stuff just to test it out. I had to, but immediately I was like, well, alright, so once I got the Switch, I remember looking at it, and I had a handful of games at launch. I think I got 1-2 Switch for some reason, or I think because I had to get that bundle or something. but I remember playing Zelda, and then I think I had Bomberman at the time.
Yeah, Bomberman.
And I remember after my first sit down with the system, I was like, all right, once you switch, I was like, yeah, I'll probably never play that again. But I was like, all right, Zelda's fine, but I'm like, man, this is also on Wii U. And then I remember playing Bomberman, being like, oh, this game's okay. And I was like, is this what the Switch is going to be? Is this going to be a Wii U thing again, where we get one game that's super solid, but really not worth getting just one system for? So I was worried. Here I am 4 years later, technically on my second Switch, just because I got the one with the newer battery. We got a second Switch because Animal Crossing. My wife wanted to play Animal Crossing, so I opted in to get the newer Switch. So here I am 4 years later, and really surprised on what this handheld did. Not only did it really save Nintendo, it kind of brought Nintendo back to its forefront. Yeah. Because it was just never the whole era of Wii U, and I didn't get a Wii U at launch. I got it like a few months later, because I didn't know the system. I didn't know the system was out, which all speaks to this. And now you look, during the pandemic, people were just scraping and going everywhere to try to get Switches because of the variety it gives us. Now, they still do make some questionable choices. I know, especially at the beginning, it was weird because we were getting just kind of shovelware all over the eShop and stuff. And I'm like, man, there's no real crowd control. I'm like, is this going to just be a Nintendo tablet? And luckily, they kind of reeled that in. Now we're getting some good ports and we're getting some good stuff. So I was glad. I'm glad that I was wrong, that this was not just a sort of final goodbye to Nintendo hardware, in a sense, where it was really the thing that helped resurrect them and kind of put them back on the map for me. My mindset had switched so much to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, where I was like, I don't need Nintendo, because I was like, even Sony's getting into some platforming stuff that's better than some Nintendo games. Gladfully, that mindset left me, and I'm glad to have the Switch part of my little gaming family now.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's one of those things where I guess my perspective on Nintendo was a little different coming into it. So after the GameCube, pretty much, I was kind of turned off of Nintendo consoles to begin with, specifically home consoles, not every offering. And so I only really was dabbling, as far as Nintendo goes, with the handhelds. Didn't play a lot of Wii, and I certainly didn't play a lot of Wii U at all. So I kind of fell off the home game market, and I only focused on the handhelds. And I loved the DS, and eventually the 3DS. I didn't love the 3DS at launch, but eventually it turned into something pretty amazing. So by the time 2017 rolled around, with Nintendo basically fusing those markets and it effectively being a handheld that can play the home console game experiences, I was completely sold on it. I was like, okay, this is exactly what they need to be doing, because to me, as far as handhelds go, they hadn't missed. I mean, the original Game Boy, classic. Yeah, and certainly there's like specific, you can be like, oh, the Game Boy Micro didn't get it done, but come on, stop. Yeah, the Game Boy Color, they snapped. Game Boy Advance, perfect. SP, one of the best designed handhelds in my opinion to this day. The DS, 3DS, so like they killed it every single time. So the idea that they were going to be able to take a handheld game and be able to play those high quality Zelda experiences, the next 3D Mario's first year on that console, I was absolutely sold. And once it came out, they proved me right pretty much. I figured this was going to do well. It's selling way faster than I thought it was going to do, which is a good thing, because the whole conversation was, is it going to sell like a home console or is it going to sell like a handheld? Definitely selling like a handheld, no doubt about that. 4 years in, about to hit 80 million.
For sure.
And I'm looking at the home game consoles right now. I sent you a link. And this is what filters out the handhelds. Once you take a look at that, it's sitting below the 360 right now, which is just... like, you know how long it took them to get there? That came out in like 05. Yeah. So like 05 to 2013. So yeah, it makes me wonder, like, where is this going to sit? I doubt it's definitely not going to hit PS2 numbers with 155. But it's certainly it's definitely going to hit 100, and it's probably going to easily pass the PlayStation and the Wii. So I'd imagine it'd sit somewhere between the PS4 and the PS2, if I had to guess. In terms of just console sales and stuff like that, which will put it pretty much around like the Game Boy and Game Boy Color numbers, which I don't think should be fused, because the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy are not the same thing, but that's fine. Yeah. I mean, 1989 and 1998, a little different, Nintendo, but okay, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, man, I was just really impressed by this console. The games have been phenomenal. I would say the release schedule has been a tad uneven. I think like Sony, for example, has done a better job at like having a steady stream of stuff. Where I feel like Nintendo go like crazy. They went crazy 2017. They had a solid 2018. Things dried up in 2019. They had some big things in 2020. 2021, we don't know what it's going to look like. So it's very uneven. They very much front-loaded the console, which made 100% sense why they did that, why they put Zelda and Mario the first year, because they needed to gain that momentum coming off of the Wii U. They needed to get this console into people's hands and prove that, hey, Nintendo's got something to say this generation as opposed to previous generations. So it made sense why they kind of like blew their load that first time. But yeah, no, I'm just really happy to see Nintendo back in the conversation, especially when I was so turned off of them these past 2 generations, where they were just not in the discussion for me personally. And they had great games during that era. I mean, the Mario Galaxy was a thing during that time. Smash Brothers Brawl. So there was great games during that era. But with what PlayStation was doing, what Xbox were doing at the time, I just didn't have space to deal with Nintendo at that point, outside the handhelds. And I'm just so glad to see them back at the forefront where you'll talk about like the highest quality Sony experiences like Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us, but right up there with them, people are throwing up Animal Crossing right there, which like who would have thought that an Animal Crossing game could be in the Game of the Year conversation next to like a Last of Us. It's pretty crazy to see what Nintendo's been able to achieve in these past few years. So I'm really, really happy about them, and I just felt like we had to give them a little bit of props. 4 years in, I think they're absolutely killing it, and a lot of people had a lot of crap to talk, myself included, about Nintendo, especially that last generation, and for them to do this major turnaround is very, very impressive. And it's kind of changed my view on Nintendo in a way that it's like, just don't count them out. You may not understand what they're doing at all times. I certainly don't understand what they're doing in terms of like virtual console stuff. I don't get it. But I don't count them out because they always find a way to kind of like crawl back from what you think is obscurity and just murder again. And I wouldn't be surprised if this outsells a lot of what like Sony and Xbox have put out, period. So
yeah, no, it is interesting, especially when I'm looking at the list right now. See, I could easily see the Switch, especially if they do introduce a Switch Pro or whatever they call it. At some point they will, which as that revision will easily get this past. Yeah, I'm thinking at least into PlayStation 4 numbers where you're at 114 million. I don't know if it'll surpass that. I think it really just depends on how long the Switch itself lasts. You really never know with Nintendo. They always for some reason think they can keep 2 families of systems existing. For a long time they said the Switch wasn't going to replace the DS, and obviously that's out of the question. So we'll see how long Nintendo lasts. I'm glad it's done so well. I'm glad that they've fixed themselves, fixed a lot of third-party relationships and stuff like that. It is a little concerning that some of the stuff is still like the virtual console, the online connection, the pricing where they think everything needs to be $60 even if it's a 10-year-old game. There is some issues that they still have, and I'm hoping they start to fix that soon. But if it keeps selling at this rate, and we keep buying it at these rates, then probably not so much. But that's Nintendo for you, unfortunately. They're their own wild animal right now. Yeah,
definitely. There's like quality of life improvements that we definitely would love from them, but in terms of just the games themselves, at the end of the day, as long as the games aren't suffering, there's not much you could say about it. You know what I mean? I have a lot of critiques of Nintendo, but at the end of the day, if they're putting out high quality first party exclusives, there's not much I could say about that. And so I'm looking at the sales. It's that DS and PS2 numbers, man. The once you get to that 154, 155 million, that's really, really tough to sell. We're talking about double what they've sold right now. So yeah, they're gonna pass Game Boy. They're gonna pass Game Boy Color, but I think it's gonna probably sit somewhere between 120, 130 million. My guess. That's my projection. What do you think? What is your projection for the Switch?
My projection probably the same. I probably see them getting at most. I'm probably seeing that 120 million.
Yeah, 120.
We would put them right above Game Boy and Game Boy Color. I just don't think. I think its biggest spike was going to be the pandemic era. So Sony had something special at PS2. This was a way to get DVD players into homes. Where Switch really situation. Where Switch really is just a gaming console. So it's not like it's being the big thing, and then DS being the just I mean, you had celebrities tweeting about the DS and real touchscreen being brought in. It's like I don't think the Switch has that sort of gimmick, especially when we don't have specific Switch versus Switch Lite numbers and stuff. What really is selling most, and we'll have to see. Because I know a bunch of people who were like, "Well, I couldn't get a Switch, so I just got the Switch Lite because I don't want to play motion," and that's a fair option. So.
Yeah,
but that would be my guess.
Yeah, and we're operating under the assumption that the Switch Pro does eventually happen, or not a Switch Pro, but something upgraded like that, and they can extract another 4 years out of it, which I don't think is wouldn't by Nintendo standards is not that abnormal. That makes it closer to an 8-year life cycle, which I think is fair. I think it's pretty understandable that with like a Pro model or something upgraded like that, especially if there's some degree of exclusivity in terms of like games you can only play on that. As long as they don't DSi it, I could definitely see them, hitting that 120 mark or something like that, extracting, 50 million more out of it, or 40 million, which again sounds like a lot, but over 4 years, I think they could do it. So hoping for success out of them, and I'm just so curious to see what becomes of this generation for them and what does it turn out to, because again, where a generation begins and where it ends, they're always so starkly different. So I'm just curious to see what the Switch ecosystem looks like once it's all said and done. Once all those exclusives are out. Once we get Breath of the Wild 2. Once 3D Mario comes back in some capacity. Once we can finally get stuff like a Bayonetta. Once Metroid finally shows up. What that ecosystem looks like. And I would imagine the first party IPs, they can't. I'm sure they're not done. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get something related to ARMS coming back. Maybe they get it right this time. Not that they messed up ARMS too, but I liked ARMS, but it left much to be desired. So who knows? Maybe they come back with ARMS. Splatoon 3 could be an absolute hit. So there are a lot of potential for this ecosystem. I have a lot of faith for Nintendo to be able to deliver. So yeah, good loose topic.
Yeah. No, the Switch is what a wild card the Switch is.
Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought after the Wii U that Nintendo would be in the position they are? But I mean, that's the game industry. It's just the rebounds. I mean, for every PS2, there's a PS3 that happens. For every 360, there's an Xbox One. Weird things happen. I mean, look at what happened to Sega after the Genesis. So like, anything can happen. You play your cards right, you reap the rewards of it like Nintendo. You play your cards wrong, you end up like Xbox and Sega. So weird things can happen, and I'm glad to see Nintendo doing well. So that was episode, I believe, 44 of the NeoVintage podcast. So we're getting up there. We're about to hit that big 50, half 100. So I'm excited about that, and there's going to be some major change within these next few weeks within the game industry and everything like that. So I'm excited about it.
For sure, we're going to have some good content to start really pumping out.
Yeah, definitely. So, till next time, this is Jabril, and I'm with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed.
And this is the NeoVintage Podcast. See you guys next week.